I am at my happy place, or my soothing place. Let me just show you one of the many New Haven beaches that I love, but this is the main one that I frequent. Honestly, I don't even know what the name of this beach is. I'd have to look it up. But this is near Westville, a part of New Haven. All right, Nigerian cultural psychosis. So this is, like I tell y'all, a lot of stuff just be downloads. I just be meditating, talking to God, writing, journaling, and a term comes to me, and I'm like, what does that mean? What is that? Um, so this term came to me. Obviously, I've been talking about rebuilding the Black self. I've been talking about split consciousness, double consciousness, triple consciousness, infinite split, right? As the experience of Black and brown people, survivors of, the Mafia, survivors of colonialism, etc. When I think about Nigeria and Nigerians and what we consider to be Nigerian culture, much of it is delusional, right? Much of it is not truly grounded in reality. And let's let the people pass. I'm going to talk about this more on my later live indoors, but I just wanted to share some ocean waves with y'all. Um, the thing is, when you refuse to teach people their history or you teach them a distorted history, it is easy for them to then distort their present reality, right? And to not understand their present experience through the lens of truth because they haven't been taught to do so, right? I have, conversations with folks who say that Tinubu, for example, is a great leader and he's doing great things for Nigeria. Part of this idea of psychosis, of cultural psychosis, which means like a collective madness, right? A whole group of people who are part of a culture are experiencing a form of delusion, are experiencing dissociation from reality, right? And what this has created, much of this is universal across the global south, but what this has created among Nigerians is a state of mind where most people don't feel capable of or don't feel that it's possible to truly change the situation, right? Most of us don't believe in revolution or social change or like giving a lot of energy to that because we don't think it's possible to actually change things, right? We have been made to we've been so convinced of the narrative and the version that the empire tells us, even through the Nigerian propagandists, that it just seems more realistic that we would always be in this situation. It seems more believable that we would always be in this situation as opposed to the possibility that things can change and they can change dramatically, right? A huge part of the psychosis is some of the stuff I touched on when I talked about how to love a Nigerian. I talked about Father's Day, just like fathering and parenting. Um, a big part of the delusion and the psychosis is what we celebrate, right? Our celebrating elitism, our celebrating status, our celebrating development, new buildings, when a huge portion of our population is literally dying of preventable illnesses, preventable poverty, preventable violence, you name it. So for us to sit in a situation or in a state where such a significant number of people are suffering and we ignore that as so-called leaders, right? We ignore that, we bypass that, and we go build a fancy building. And then people clap, pat us on the back, they clap for us, they celebrate this fancy new building. You understand what I'm saying? These are forms of psychosis. Like I can't think of it any other way, right? We have normalized prioritization of how things look over how they actually are. We've normalized celebrating pretty pictures over taking stock of our reality, of our nation, of our countrymen, and building solutions that are actually tangible. We have normalized allowing the actual people that oppress us, that steal from us, that give weapons to the so-called terrorists. We've normalized letting those people dictate and assess our success and tell us whether or not we have been successful, whether or not we are, how developed we are as a people, right? People who went all around the world destroying nations, destroying societies, pillaging and harming people. Then they come and tell us, you know, we're gonna grade you on your corruption. We're gonna, it's insanity. Let me read your comments. Welcome, family. It's good to see you guys. Hi, Arkansas. Hi, Christ lover. Hi, Stacy. Yo. So I just had to drop those thoughts. I just was looking into like cultural psychosis. This is a brand new thing. I come on here to, basically like synthesize my thoughts, right? Why I'm even sharing, trying to name it and sharing this is because when we think about our liberation journey from within, right? When we think about it as a mental, spiritual, physiological healing journey, then it's helpful to sort of label some of the maladies, right? Obviously, people like Frantz Fanon and W.E.B. Du Bois have done this. I'm still learning more about like Black psychologists. But when, just like if there's something going on in your body, if you are unwell, you get a diagnosis, you feel a little bit better because you're like, okay, now that I know what it is, I know how to deal with it, right? So if we think about the experience of Nigerians as an illness, as a mental illness, as a form of madness, and we think about how psychosis or madness or mental illness has been addressed in other contexts, then it makes sense how we start to talk about what the healing, remedy is, what the healing strategies are. I have a few more minutes. Shout out to England. I am hitting y'all up from New Haven, Connecticut. So, if you've watched my previous videos, you've seen me talk about rebuilding the Black self from within, liberation from within, and you've heard me talk about split consciousness. And so when we think about psychosis, it is this experience of being so far, so dissociated from reality, right? So far from who you truly are or what you truly are experiencing, that you are seeing things that aren't real, right? You believe things that aren't true, right? And so what makes it psychosis in the like sort of regular individual context is that, if I'm sitting next to you and I'm talking to this, this figure, this person that I see, right? And I'm like, oh, this is my grandmother's right in front of me. I'm having a conversation with her, but you're sitting right next to me. You don't see the grandmother. You're going to think I'm crazy. You're going to call me a psycho, right? Now, if I take the different categories of Nigerians, if I take up the population that is so-called elite, so-called educated, right? Been educated abroad, right? And then I compare them to somebody who lives in the slums, who hasn't had access to education. And then I compare them to, so that's two categories. And then the third category is a very, very, small population of those of us who know Nigeria's history well enough to be able to give a thoughtful assessment of what the current reality is, right? If you take those three groups of people, they're, and each of them sort of perceives the other's experience, right? They're having a conversation and talking about what they're experiencing, it would be really hard for the next group to make sense of what they're talking about because it would be hard to imagine. It wouldn't make sense to them, right? So people who don't know history, when folks who do know history talk about the state of the world and the state of the country, they think it's conspiracy theories. They think it's psychosis. They think it's craziness because they can't see it. It's not real to them. right? So we'll be talking more about this. I just wanted to drop these thoughts initially. I'm just curious if you've heard the term before, if you've heard people, or if you're familiar with scholarship that kind of diagnoses, cultural phenomena. But I definitely want to dig into this a lot more. I might get back on here tonight or, in the next day or two to really break it down and share some of the research that I pulled up. I have pulled up some research. Of course, it's a little bit of like Carl Jung and all these, different psychologists have talked about this. But a lot of this is either buried and hard to find in our African scholarship, or it's just minimally supported, it's minimally researched. If we're gonna get sane, because for a people to remain subjugated for 500 years, there are theories, there are people who think that, they've jazzed us. And I really be looking at a lot of us sometimes, I'll be like, they got to be under a spell. We got to be under a spell because it don't make sense. No other way. Let's take a few deep breaths. Let me just put my back to the ocean so that you can read with me with the ocean in the background. And then we're going to go. I hope you can hear me okay. How's that look? How's that? Okay. Oh, hand on your heart. Deep inhale, hold it. Slow exhale. I don't know if y'all heard anything I said because of the wind, but hopefully you got some of this. More deep inhales. Deep inhale, hold it. Slow exhale. Deep inhale, hold it. Slow exhale. All right, friends. I pray safety for you. I pray peace. I pray love. I pray joy. I pray resonance with truth, with the divine Holy Spirit, with the Holy One, the maker of all, creator of the universe. I pray love and affection and intimacy, and intimacy as spiritual technology, as liberation technology. We're going to talk about that soon, too. All right. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments, questions, and we'll talk.